Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing session for the day. So today I've picked up a question on economic growth and development, and this is related to the small entrepreneurs in the economy. There was this article in Hindu editorial which talked about how we were supposed to boost the small entrepreneurs and focus less on strict formalization. In that context, a question has been asked, but the question has a wider dimension, and you don't have to restrict yourself to the thoughts that have been mentioned in the article. Now, I'll read out the question for y'all, and before I do that, I'll mention a few prerequisites that are important when you address in an economic growth and development based question where there is inclusive growth involved. One is the usage of keywords, like for example, when there is inclusive growth, economic growth, and development, there are certain key words which are related to these terms, like democratization of growth, demographic dividend, and then progressive taxation, etc. I am basically outlining some terms that are useful in order to enrich your answer when the question is on economic growth and development. So first is the usage of keywords. Second, there are several policies that are there, policies and schemes which aim at inclusive development or economic growth. So all these schemes can be mentioned. And the third thing to mention is the usage of committee reports. There are several committees, and some of these committees can be mentioned in order to enrich your answer. Now that we have discussed the prerequisites, remember when you write an economics based answer, it is always good to talk about the recent economic survey and also the budget provisions which are there. This will add a current affairs tinge to your answer. Now I'll move forward and read out the question for y'all, and once I do that, we will be able to evolve the subheadings that we do under the introduction, body, and the conclusion format. So what is the question? In the race to achieve high economic prospects, the voices of India's tiny entrepreneurs living in rural areas and the urban fringes should not be ignored. Elucidate. So basically, the question says India has a lot of ambition at the moment. It wants to become a $5 trillion economy, and it wants to create so many jobs. Like, for example, national manufacturing policy wants to increase the contribution of manufacturing to 25% from the current 16%. And in addition, you have in agriculture, you have doubling farmers income, and you want inclusive growth, and you want zero poverty, and so on. So if you look at the different ambitions that India is setting at the moment, these ambitions are quite high. And in addition to this, if you look at the focus that is being given at the moment, we are focused mostly on large entrepreneurs. Like for example, for the last few years, we have been focusing on insolvency and bankruptcy code. We have been focusing on bringing the black money of rich people from outside to inside, and then we have been focusing on commercial codes and the ways in which the corporates of larger firms can be benefited. But in this context, in this process of huge economic prospects, we are basically neglecting some sections in the society. I mean, some important people in the society. These are the tiny entrepreneurs. This is what this question is trying to say. So overall, we have to establish towards the end that these small entrepreneurs, the small and medium enterprise sector, medium MSME sector, and then the rural entrepreneurs, etc., are also equally important as and when compared to the large entrepreneurs, which the government is focusing on anyway. So that is what we have to establish. So what are the side headings that I would keep? Firstly, I'm going to talk about the neglect that these tiny entrepreneurs are facing. So I will first establish how these tiny entrepreneurs are not having enough focus, not having enough support from the side of the government. That once I establish that, I'll move forward and tell the examiner why it is important to help these small entrepreneurs. See, the question basically is trying to tell us that we should not be ignoring the small entrepreneurs. So I'll have to tell them why should I not ignore the small entrepreneurs? Like for example, they produce lots and lots of employment, first thing, and secondly, they have the capacity to increase the GDP, harness the demographic dividend, increase the export potential, tap the export competitiveness, and so on. So there are several reasons why you have to focus on your small entrepreneurs, and you have to establish that. So these two are going to be my basic subheadings. And in addition to that, now that I have mentioned why I should not be neglecting my small entrepreneurs, I'll move forward and tell them the steps that have to be taken. Some of the steps that have been taken by the government, some of the steps that should be taken by the government in order to tap this sector of small entrepreneurs. So this is going to be my basic structure of my answer. I'll start off by talking about the existing scenario, the status quo in which the small entrepreneurs are neglected. Secondly, I'll tell the examiner why these people should not be neglected, and then I'll move forward and give him a way forward. That should be my basic structure of my answer. And how do I start my introduction? I could start my introduction with India's ambition for huge economic prospects. Like, for example, India aims to become a $5 trillion economy. That is one way to talk about it. Or also, I'll talk, or in other ways, I can talk about the concentration of small entrepreneurship. Like, for example, the concentration of MSME sector in the country. These are the people who are mostly coming under small entrepreneurs, especially in urban fringes and so on. So the better way to talk about is the establishment of high economic prospects, in which I talk about the large goal which India has in its forefront. Having talked about this, I'll move forward, talk about the body, the skeleton of which has already been established by us so far, and then I'll go out with a nice conclusion. Now that we've seen the structure of our answer, I'll move forward and talk about how this person has written the answer in the real time scenario. So he starts out by talking about the target which India has, about $5 trillion economy. So he's basically starting out with a government policy, or you could say that he started out with a fact. That is a good way to introduce your answer, especially if you are short of time. Just try and write a two line fact, which is of course relevant, and then immediately move to the body of his answer. Next, see what he has done. He's basically slightly mimicking the nature of the question. The question basically tells us that it is good to have economic prospects, high economic ambitions, but then you cannot ignore so and so entrepreneurs. So, first, he is establishing how India is having high economic ambitions at the moment. And by doing that, and in order to do that, he has done what? He has given me some targets. What are the targets? With respect to agriculture, he talked about doubling farmers' income. With respect to economy as a whole, he has already talked about a $5 trillion economy. And in addition to this, with respect to industrialization and manufacturing, he's talking about make in India, assemble in India, and industrialization. Assemble in India is basically a new term that has come up, and you have to keep this in mind because this has been talked about in a recent economic survey, and we've also discussed a question on this under the Kalam's program itself. Anyway, we will move forward and we will see what else he has written. He's talking about the export target which India has. When the foreign trade policy came, it came up in 2015 and it lasts till 2020, which is the present year. So the target was to achieve $900 billion dollars of export trade, and these are the basic figures that he has given me to establish that India has high economic ambitions. Now in this context, he is telling me, in the context of this high economic ambitions, India is neglecting the tiny entrepreneurs. He's establishing the facts here. How is he doing it? He does it in the following way. So he says, if you focus excessively on formalization, this will increase compliance costs on rural entrepreneurs. Formalization means what? There have to be some accounts that have to be kept, and then there are rules to fire or hire, and then there are rules to provide some kind of facilities to the employees that are there. While some of the offshoots of formalization are positive, which is why we are all craving for formalization, but there are certain problems as well. If the firm is too small and you're forcing it to comply to certain provisions, some rules, this is going to increase the cost of the firm. Then the firm itself becomes unviable. So that is one point he's talking about. And because of these compliance costs, rural entrepreneurs are facing a brunt. Next, he's talking about poor credit linkages. Like, for example, the banks at the moment are in an excessively cautionary mode. Why is that? Because of the rising problem of NPAs. NPA problem, some of the experts feel that the NPA problem is subsiding these days, but largely they say that the problem is still rampant. There are lots of non-performing assets. In such a case, will I lend to a small entrepreneur? If I am a bank, will I lend to a small entrepreneur? No, because I'm not sure he would be paying the money back. So I'll be excessively cautionary when I lend my money to him. Next, he's trying to establish the excessive focus on high-end companies, the bigger companies, like you are giving out certain legislations and rules like insolvency and bankruptcy code, and then there are decrees of corporate taxes, especially of large entrepreneurs. So all these steps are basically focusing excessively on large entrepreneurs, but small entrepreneurs are getting lesser support. That is what he's establishing. Here, it looks to me that he's against the fact that the government is supporting large entrepreneurs. This shouldn't be the case. He should talk about it in such a way that India spends more of its energies on the large entrepreneurs relatively compared to the small entrepreneurs. Moderate your words. Don't sound too negative, because large entrepreneurs are also important. Cutting down corporate taxes is also important. Insolvency bankruptcy code is also important. So when you word your terms, do so very carefully. Next, he moves forward and talks about FDI investment, global supply chains, etc. So when these things come into the country, they are going to establish their own firms and so on. This will decrease the local employment. So he's trying to establish how tiny entrepreneurs are neglected in the economy at the moment, but at some point he has also given me points to go against the measures like FDI investment and so on, which are also good. So he was supposed to adhere to some kind of balance in his thought. Other than that, it seems to be fine. Now I'll move forward and talk about the next part that he has written. Now he's talking about the need for supporting small entrepreneurs. Good. First, they have the highest caliber of employment generation. Like for example, the MSME sector has how contributes to how much percent of the employment in the country? I want you to write down in the comment section. MSME sector, the contribution to employment, the contribution to GDP, and the contribution to exports. This way you'll be able to understand the importance of MSME sector. Otherwise, if you passively read your newspaper, you'll read it and forget it. But if you research it and write it down in comment section, maybe you'll remember it. Now we'll move forward. So if I boost these rural and peri-urban areas entrepreneurs, that is going to increase the development in those areas. So this will lead to regional development, balanced regional development, not only between states but also intrastate. Within the state itself, there is going to be a balance in development. Next, these small entrepreneurs have remarkable resilience. Like for example, in 2008 crisis, the global crisis or the global meltdown, these were the first people who came, who were up and working. And secondly, even if it was the case of demonetization in December or November 2016, these entrepreneurs eventually and very quickly came back onto their toes. So they exhibit remarkable resilience. In addition to this, there is a rise of gig economy culture. In this context, you have to support the small entrepreneurs. Otherwise, the gig economy, which has a great future, will be constrained or restrained. Next, he's moving forward to talk about a transition space. I think this is the most important point in the answer that has been written. These small entrepreneurs, they basically provide a transition ground. Like for example, if you want a society to move from an agricultural society to that of an industrial society, it has to pass through certain phases, and this is that phase. These small entrepreneurs, or rural, be it rural or peri-urban, provide that kind of opportunity. They bridge between the excessively formal urban centers and the excessively informal rural centers. So they provide skill development, they provide opportunities, credit, and so on. So all these things are important for a rural entrepreneur, and they are the characteristics of a rural and semi-urban entrepreneur. So they are really important. Now we moves forward and talks about domestic projects. Like for example, there were facts on Mangalyaan and Chandrayaan. If you look at the look at the sourcing of these components, a good number of components have been sourced domestically, and SMEs or small and medium entrepreneurs have contributed in a good amount in these areas. So he has very well established the importance of small entrepreneurs. Now he moves forward and gives us a way forward. First is the fact that these people have to form associations. Individually, they do not have that negotiating power. So when these form organizations, they'll be able to get better terms. Whenever they take up a deal or something like that, they'll have better terms. And in addition to this, if these small entrepreneurs come together, there will be sharing of knowledge, first thing. And secondly, there is better mentoring. If there is a group of people, the government can always put a mentor on top of them who is going to guide them. In addition to this, if these people come together, their products will be will have such a quality that they will be able to negotiate better terms of trade without individually being subverted. That is one point. In addition to this, he has given me certain schemes: Mudra Yojana, Shishu Kishore Tarun. Basically, Shishu Kishore Tarun are under Mudra Yojana, and in addition, you have Startup India for startups, Stand Up India for SC/ST entrepreneurs and women, and Apprentice Protsahan Yojana. This is basically an apprentice scheme in which the stipend has been increased, and also the avenues of apprenticeship have been widened. In addition to this, there are other self-employment schemes. So he has given me a good number of points on the way forward, but he should have handled it in terms of the skill development, in terms of the funding, in terms of the schemes that are there. There are lots of schemes stranded here and there, but it would have been better if there were subheadings. Like for Mudra Yojana, there would have been a subheading of funding, and for skill development, there could have been a subheading of Apprentice Protsahan Yojana and Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, and so on. And then there should have been a subheading on schemes of the government, which is Startup India, Stand Up India. So that way you will be able to segregate the mind of the examiner and tell him that you have covered all the aspects of the answer. So that is the way forward. Now he moves forward and gives us a conclusion. He says, in addition to all this, you have to increase the managerial competence of the person who is handling this, who is taking forward this rural entrepreneurship. If these people have work hard but their expertise is pretty low, that has to be increased. And in addition to this, whoever working in these small firms, these firms are basically small amount of people, like less than 5 or 6 people, definitely less than 10 people, so social security norms have to be provided. So overall, the answer is good. The first side heading could have been written better, in my opinion, because, for example, in this side heading, it looks like he is going a bit negative against the government support towards large entrepreneurs or corporate firms. That shouldn't be the case. Write a balanced answer. Tell them that the government is excessively focusing in so and so areas relatively compared to other areas. Moderate your words, but overall, this is a good answer. I think I want you all to write other points under these subheadings and put them down in the comment section. That should be my review for the day. Thank you for the participation. I'll meet you all on Monday.